maybe what you're interested in this evening.
I'm Brian. I started doing film or TV rather a few years ago. I pitched and had my first show picked up. And this year I made a film, a really low-budget film, which seems like it's in around the amount of money that people could possibly raise to crowdfunding. So just kind of learn how that's done.
For a new film that you're planning to shoot, or for the existing?
No, I have nothing. I do more producing than I don't create them. You know, but other people part of it. Some friends just raised a lot of money for crowdfunding to do an album. I never heard that I had finished a movie by sort of a YouTube feed where they would give people fake credits and sing songs to them, and they finished a really $45. So.
Welcome.
I'm Sean. I'm a writer and a filmmaker, and I have a film project going to camera June 11th. So we've talked about crowdfunding, and we thought about crowdfunding before. We went to camera and decided to do it after, so that we have more material for the campaign. And
you were here for the meet and greet, right, on the 17th?
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
My name is Blair. I'm a short filmmaker. I'm an animator. I've done 3 short films so far. And yeah, I'm just here to basically learn more about crowdfunding because I am an animator. I work alone, so I do need to find out more about crowdfunding. And
to crowdfund some of your animation projects, to crowdfund some of your
that's
skills?
Right. Yeah.
Or all of that together, just
all
what it's
together.
all about.
Yeah.
Welcome.
My name is Greg. I'm a marketer, and I work with a lot of filmmakers, and I would like to be a filmmaker someday. And at that time, I'd like to know how to get money.
Welcome.
I'm Bryn. I did the 2 short. Bryn.
Bryn?
Yeah. I did the 2 short films and 1 feature documentary. Right now I'm focusing on my feature film. So that's why I'm here.
Nice. Okay.
Hey, I'm Rebecca. I'm an actor and a writer, and we're shooting a webisode, so 10 episodes in June. So.
What's the start date?
To be determined.
Okay.
Sort of a little bit based on.
Pending.
Yeah, and based on our various things, but yeah.
Okay. Hi.
Okay, I'm Lisa. I'm a video editor, and I'm writing some web projects, web series with some animators. And before we start pitching to, production companies, it would be nice to have a web presence with our web series when we're ready to launch, and so on.
Did you hook up with Blair?
Not yet.
Hey everybody, I'm Thomas. I won my patch here today, so that's why I'm here. But I'm a writer. I work really hard at it. I run a film festival, and
which one?
Viewpoint Film Challenge.
Okay, cool.
Everybody knows of it. And yeah, it was something that could have actually, we were looking at crowdfunding capabilities to keep it running, as opposed to entry fee kind of capabilities. But no, I'm just very intrigued, so we'll see how it goes.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Jennifer. Really coming because my boyfriend's into filmmaking. We just worked together on a short film for the 40-hour film festival, and he plans to make bigger films, and I helped with writing and makeup on this one, and was just interested in learning more.
What's your specialty?
I don't know. I guess that was my first time working on film, and probably writing.
You're a makeup artist or anything? You said makeup?
Yeah, I can make as well.
Okay.
So a variety of dead-looking people, and yeah, I do photo shoots and makeup and stuff like that.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Okay, everybody. So everybody knows me. How many people have heard of the concept of the PMD before? Producer, marketing, distribution. Can I see a show of hands, please? Raise your hand if you've heard of the PMD before. 2 people. 3 people. And of course, for those who missed it, everybody knows who John Reese is. Have you heard of John Reese? A book called Think Outside the Box Office. Yeah, the same people that heard about the PMD. Great. Now, everybody came to find out about crowdfunding. Who is actually crowdfunding presently on any platform whatsoever, be it Kickstarter, Indiegogo, or one of the lesser known ones? Anybody at all? Crowdfunding something presently? Within days of crowdfunding a project? Already have assembled the elements to crowdfund? Okay, besides participating in one, anybody organizing or thinking very seriously about a, I don't know what, like a, 30-day push? You started to put together the materials?
Yeah, we started to talk about what will be in the package.
Okay, great. Alright, so basically everyone's starting from the ground level. We're going to talk about crowdfunding from its inception, what it means, what it entails for you, and whether or not it's something that you should do or you shouldn't do. Everybody's read this spec that we had, of course, on the basis of this. Everybody came to this particular event today. So everybody knows generally what we're going to be talking about. Great, okay. So let's dive right in. Instead of kind of faffing around, let's get right into it. I have a 5-point checklist, which is going to be kind of the touchstone for what we're going to be talking tonight about crowdfunding. It's a 5-point checklist that I run all of my clients through, or anybody who basically wants to ask me about crowdfunding. I want to know where they stand on these 5 pillars. And I'll go through them one by one now, and I'll write them down over here on the board, and I'll talk about everything that's related to that. This is a very interactive session. It means interrupt me whenever you feel like it. If you don't understand something I said, or you just want a clarification, jump in and cut me off. I do not get bent out of shape about that. Also, if you have a suggestion, throw it in there so we can have a good discussion amongst everybody. And this is going to be very back and forth, so don't think it's just me standing here talking on high. It's a workshop, so let's work through stuff. If anybody wants to bring in specific examples with respect to their projects and just wants to have everybody participate, this is a great way to crowdsource your ideas. One kind of crowdsourcing is crowdfunding. It's the most famous of the crowdsourcing methods. So we'll try to make this into kind of a mini crowdsourcing type of commune right now. Okay, so the first one that I talk about is sum. Sum. Crowdfunding is for a particular sum of money. You have to be very specific what you're trying to raise the money for. When you go out to the public and you ask to raise money from the crowd, you have to let people know exactly what it is that you're raising money for. What is a reasonable amount of money to raise for a first-time crowdfunder who's never crowdfunded in their life, who doesn't have a track record with crowdfunding on any of the platforms? Who can tell me the name of the 2 famous crowdfunding platforms that exist? Just jump in there. Anybody? And? Right. So, if you've never done a Kickstarter or Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign before, a reasonable amount of money to try to raise on your first go is $15,000 to $20,000. All figures US, it doesn't really matter because the dollar now will have a kind of a Canadian flavoring of this workshop, but $15,000 to $20,000 is a reasonable amount of money to raise for a first-time crowdfunding campaign. The reason I select this particular figure, first of all, is from personal experience. I've noticed in some of the crowdfunding campaigns that I've participated on, I've been through 4 successful ones, and I've consulted on a number of others where people just basically ask me clarifying questions as I go along, and I might participate with some low-level tweeting and some low-level reaching out to my personal networks. But I've participated in 4 as a full-time participant, and we've always raised these amounts. On all 4 occasions, we oversubscribed. It means we tried to raise 20, and we hit 21, I think 24. We hit just over 20 the last time, and the first time we raised 15,000, which was actually 17,000. So we oversubscribed. Before I go deeper into crowdfunding, how many people know the difference between Kickstarter and Indiegogo? Just jump in there and say the difference if you know the difference. Lisa.
I think that Kickstarter, if you don't raise your goal, that you don't get any of the money. Like
Right.
It's just, they don't charge the credit cards. And I think Indiegogo, you do get whatever it is you manage to raise.
Exactly.
Okay.
One is kind of a Vegas type approach where it's an all or nothing proposition, and the other one is partial payments. Of course, in the case of Indiegogo, if you raise partial amounts of money, if you ask for 20 and you raise 10, you get to keep the 10, but the commission, the withholding, the holdback percentage, we'll get into that, the holdback percentage on Indiegogo is much higher if you don't raise your sum. This is very important, this figure, because trying to go out as a first-time crowdfunder and asking for 60 grand, for example, or asking for crazy amounts of money, is going to lose you a lot of credibility with your potential audience. It's going to make you look greedy. It's going to make you look partially stupid. And you probably won't raise that amount of money unless you've got something that you're bringing to the table. We'll get into that, of course, in a little bit. Unless you're bringing something to the table in which people already can see there's been a proof of concept for your particular project, don't be raising money amounts like that. There you go. Very simple sum, 15 to 20,000. It's easy for most first-time crowdfunders to aim for that.
What if you try to raise less? Yeah.
Why would you want to raise less? If you could raise more.
Because I think it's easier, like a raise.
To raise less than raise more? There's two things with that. One is, if you try to raise less when you can raise more, you're broadcasting a kind of a lack of confidence in your project, which, for most people that aren't aware, people are everywhere. You're everywhere, you're everywhere, you're everywhere. You know exactly what's going on online. In other words, you know other crowdfunding campaigns that are successful. We'll talk about some of them because I brought some examples, and I'll show you some really wickedly successful ones. But if you can raise 20 and you only raise 10, it's kind of broadcasting a certain kind of a message. You might be able to raise 10, actually on Kickstarter you might be able to ask for 10 and raise 20. But if you can already raise 20, go for 20 and then raise 30. That's my kind of experience with this. That's not to say you can't raise 10. That's not to say you can't raise 10 4 times. You can have 4 separate crowdfunding campaigns running over, and that leads into my next point. You can run it over 4 different durations and raise 40,000 in 4 installments as opposed to asking for 40,000 at one shot. Just let's be clear, in Canada, you cannot use Kickstarter or anywhere else outside the United States. You can use Indiegogo. You're not required to have an American address or an American bank account in order to raise money on Indiegogo. But most of the great Kickstarter campaigns are run by people that are not based in the States, and they find American partners. So if you're serious about making your movie, and you're going to make indie filmmaking a career, think about opening up a company in the States. There's a lot of ways to do that. It's beyond the kind of the purview of this discussion, and there's ways to do that. Or find a partner in the States that can help you raise the cash and take the cash on your behalf. Anyway, so let's, yeah.
Isn't there a Kickstarter.ca?
No. There is not. No.
Hey, is that figure for film? Like, say if somebody's doing a web series, isn't the figure, wouldn't that be lower? 15 to 20,000?
Well, yeah, okay. You mean, I was actually hoping that you'd ask me if that's for entrepreneurial ideas, music, besides film. It depends what kind of web series it is. There's no hard and fast rule. And I like to know what's the genre, what are you dealing with, who are the attachments, who's involved with that, what's your production experience like, you know, what you call your extra diegetic materials, I'll get into it, all the stuff that's related to your film that's not in your film, and your website. I need to see a lot of other things in advance. This number, of course, is not in stone. This is a reasonable amount of money for people to raise the very first time you even contemplate doing some kind of a crowdfunding campaign.
Sorry, maybe
Yeah.
you'll cover this, but
Yeah.
so if you do Kickstarter, you do have to go sort of that American route. Doesn't that make it a lot more complicated?
Why complicated?
Just to find that, and like if I could just do Indiegogo with my own address, like is there more clout with Kickstarter or something, or more, does it look better or something?
Yeah, that's something I was getting into by the
Okay.
by, but I don't mind getting into it now. And the idea is, you put across a brand image. It's good for your brand equity. I mean, let's think like marketers too, because independent filmmakers have to think like business people and not exclusively like filmmakers. It's good when you demonstrate that you ask for a certain amount of money and you raise it. That shows a lot of bona fides and that shows a lot of balls. And also, again, it's that lack of confidence thing that I'm talking about. If you are willing to settle for less than the full enchilada, if you're willing to settle for less than the end goal, it does not leave the same kind of impression in the minds of your audiences, and moreover, in the minds of your potential distribution partners. They like to see that you're bringing a lot of stuff to the table. If you score 2 successful crowdfunding campaigns on Kickstarter, it's worth for you to go and find an American partner, or to think about opening up a US bank account, or something along those lines. Again, that's not within the purview of what I wanted to talk about, but it is worthwhile. And I'll show you examples of people not based in the States that have found US partners, and they're raising some really kick-ass money. So duration. How long is a really valid, potentially viral, successful crowdfunding campaign? My experience, 30 days. 1 month. Yes, you'll tell me there are durations longer than a month, and yes, there are successful crowdfunding campaigns that have lasted for 2 months, for 45 days, and even for 25 days. But I like a month. A month is basically within the natural cycle of things. It's the income cycle, it's the tax cycle, it's the annual cycle, and it's a good target. Everybody understands 30 days. Like calendar days. Try to set up your crowdfunding campaign so that it initiates on the beginning of a month. Doesn't have to, but it's kind of good that way. It gets everybody, glomming around the same goal. That's my experience. Again, there's always exceptions to the rule to anything I say, and this is not the gospel. I like that, the gospel of John Reese. That was good, Tishka. That's good, I'm going to use that. But this is something that's reasonable and achievable. The next one. Team. Who wants to take a crack at what that means? Anybody? Shoot the hand up, or just jump it up. Team? What do I mean by team?
The people you have helping you get the word out.
Right on. The people I have helping me as the filmmaker getting word out about the crowdfunding campaign. A crowdfunding campaign is not waged alone. That's not to say that it can't be waged alone, but it is generally not waged alone. On the 4 campaigns that I participated on, there were at any one time 5 of us participating. Spelling each other because we were in different time zones. Thankfully it was on the same continent, so we didn't have like these major fluctuations like 6 hours to Europe, 8 hours. It was all within North America, so we had people on the West Coast, people on the East Coast, and people in the middle, so it was kind of, we were jumping around that way. But at any one time there were 5 people. Madly tweeting, madly status updating, madly blogging, madly updating on the actual crowdfunding platforms like Kickstarter or Indiegogo. They have an update tab in which you update the status of the project over the course of the 30 days. Anyway, the team. This is very important. If you don't have this organized before you initiate your crowdfunding campaign, don't do it. Don't even try. Unless you're willing to have long sleepless nights. Because as we got towards the end of these particular campaigns, we had like 48-hour periods where we weren't sleeping. And it's fun when you don't sleep for like 2 days towards the end. And you make the goal. And I remember we came up with this great hashtag, boom, all caps, and then boom, 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 like every time we bring in some money, these small increments of money towards the end. We're crawling ever so inexorably towards the end goal. $5, $10, $1,500, it was like boom, boom, boom. And you see like the whole Twitter sphere was alight with notifications from that particular campaign. That team is very important. Think about who you want to bring aboard. Think about how they're going to get compensated. They have to get compensated. Meaning if they're on your production staff already, then perhaps they're already being compensated. If they're relatives or if they're whatever, co-producers, then it's part of their, I guess, their compensation package. But if it's an outside player, like an intern, or some kind of a production coordinator, or a PMD, producer of marketing and distribution, or somebody who specializes in marketing, they don't have to be film people, by the way. Think about compensating them somehow. What's reasonable? 10 points? Sounds exorbitant, but it's not. In other words, if they raise 40 grand, think about paying them 3,500 or 3 grand. Seems like a big chunk off of your net, but the amount of work that they're putting in to bring you to that point, on a basic film that doesn't have a lot of attachments, we'll get into what I mean by that, like a lot of things involved that make it really glorious. 3 grand for somebody to spend like 30 days with you, nothing else to help you crowdfund, that's a reasonable amount of money. There's different permutations and variations on the compensation. You might give them just a flat fee and say in advance, this is what I'm going to pay you. They might say to you, I don't want anything, I just want to help you out because I love this social cause documentary that you're doing about water. Like a recent project now that's out in the space right now called Last Call at the Oasis, which is part of the Food Inc. and Waiting for Superman, I think it's called, that whole participant media group of documentaries which are very viral. So the team.
Can I ask another question?
Yep.
Like, are there people watching these campaigns that closely that you need to be, like, tweeting madly? Because that could just be my ignorance about it. That, like, someone, like, is that the point, sort of? Like, that you would need to be that crazy on it? That is how you have to do it?
There are 2 ways to answer that. First question is the obvious, which is, it depends what kind of film you're making,
Right.
or documentary, feature film or documentary. Because we're only going to talk about films. Of course, crowdfunding can be used for other types of initiatives, entrepreneurial ideas. It can be used for music, for albums, but we're going to talk about feature films and docs. It depends what kind of film you're shooting. If there's a lot of stuff in that film, a lot of work that's already been done, in other words, what are you crowdfunding for? By the way, you're not crowdfunding from the entire budget of your movie. Sean, right? You're not crowdfunding for all your budget. I'm not saying you can't do it, just don't do it. Crowdfunding for a percentage. Crowdfunding is found money. It's bonus money. It's not a right. You don't have a right to that money. Just because it's available, not every film is meant to be crowdfunded. We talked about that in this little spec here. Not every film, and I'll talk about what I mean by that. But you don't raise your whole budget. So you don't have to worry about it being an all or nothing proposition. If the film is good enough to appeal to an audience, you don't have to go crazy and tweet like crazy. But sometimes you need escape velocity, I call it, like rocket propulsion, to get it out of the stratosphere, and then you gotta really work Twitter. People are, by their nature, at this level of evolution with Web 2.0. Somebody wants to come in? Hi there. That's okay. At this level of evolution, you've got to really break through the clutter. And there's time zone issues with tweeting, because if it's a global audience, right? There's tune out, there's boredom, there's I don't want to pay attention to this anymore. There's also small amounts, for example. You know, everybody understands, and we'll get into this in the strategy section, everybody understands there's pledge rewards, and there's different amounts that you can ask from people. It's better to go for 4 quick, massive pledge rewards. Then you don't have to go and niggle around with like dollars, $10, $15, $20. That's a real lot of work to put in for like a really low impact contribution. But if you can score like 10 people at 5K, you're done. You're out. You're out in like 10 days. You're out in 5 days. And then the rest of the time is gravy money, right? Because the campaign goes to the end. So it depends on what kind of film you're trying to shoot. In other words, what genre it falls in. Is it a horror flick? Is it an Asian martial arts movie? Is it a social cause documentary? Is it some other genre type of picture? Or have you brought the project to a certain level of progress before you go into crowdfunding? Or is it none of those things? Is it just like a passion project? Is it an experimental documentary with some really funky lights and stuff like that? Like this Gaspar Noé movie that I saw. Anybody know it? The one that was shot in Hong Kong? It's called... Yes, thank you. Like that one, like I saw, we were just like, okay, I mean, there's an audience for that, no doubt, but trying to crowdfund that might be successful. But as a PMD, I'd come aboard and say, well, how am I going to attach myself to that? Yeah, there's a Japanese audience, people that, because the film was shot in Tokyo, for those who don't know. Enter the Void, Gaspar Noé, famous French director. It was shot in Tokyo. Yeah, there's all kinds of things we can go on with respect to the Japanese environment, expatriate communities, psychedelic drugs. Like there's a train spotting type community for that, but generally, no. Again, so it all depends on your movie. And we can talk about your specific movie after the break. We'll come and we'll have more of a robust Q&A about specific projects. The fourth pillar, when we're talking about pillars, the fourth pillar, my diagnostic tool, this is a diagnostic tool. The fourth one is strategy. Strategy. What does that mean? It means, when are we going to start this crowdfunding campaign? I'm just going to fire questions at you. When are we going to start this crowdfunding campaign? When? Spring, summer, winter, after a film festival? In conjunction with another major event, the Olympics in London? Is it topical? Does it have to do with International Women's Day, International Human Rights Day? Does it have to do with some kind of a military conflict? Does it have to do with the Arab Spring? Does it have to do with, something that's going on in the Gulf with oil? Is it a pressing issue with respect to the food crisis or something? I don't know what. A presidential election somewhere. This is all part of your strategy. How do you release? And this will be point 5. How do you release the materials that you're collecting in order to wage this campaign? How do you do that? Do you do it daily? Do you do it once every 2 days? Do you do it not at all? Do you have a website? Do you cross-link things? Do you get some? Do you socially share across 5 platforms every single piece of content that you put out? What does that mean? Do you put it on Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, Google+, and a blog post, and you retweet it across 3 time zones? And there's a way to do this with tools like Hootsuite or TweetDeck. There's a way to do this. What's the strategy? You have to know what's going on. You have to know how you're going to do this. You can't just go into it blindly. I'm not saying you can't. I'm not saying you can't prepare and not crowdfund. There's always flukes, but better to be prepared. And if I'm going in as a strategist, as a consultant, as a PMD, as a producer of marketing and distribution, I want to know what you thought about with respect to that. And then you ask me questions and I'll come back with some suggestions of things that I've worked in the past. Extra diegetic content is a Latin term, things that are outside of the vision of the things that you see. Diegetic is the things that you see. So things that are part of the film that are not in the film. What do I mean by that? Behind the scenes features. Interviews with the cast and the crew. Related artwork. Blair, this is kind of interesting for you. Related artwork to the process of you actually coming out with some 3D renderings. Your motivations for getting involved with the project if you're not the director. Recce's, location recce's. When you go, to sort of sniff out a few locations where you can shoot things. The whole casting session, which Elie Reinheid is the gentleman behind the camera for his film, Living with Strangers, is doing a recording of the casting sessions so that he can later compile it as part of some potential bonus material. Living with Strangers is the name of the film, and on Facebook as well. What else is bonus materials? Could be, for example, as part of a pledge reward, coming onto the set, sniffing around what's going on behind the scenes, with permission to take your own gonzo little camera like that one that's over in the corner where Jamie's sitting. Like that flip camera, just recording stuff for your own purposes. You might get the permission to do that from a particular director, producer, independent filmmaker. Does everybody understand what strategy means? Hi there. Hi there.
What type of social network is assumed that you already have in place before you do something like this?
Good question. That one came up on Tuesday. I had a phone-in with Stacey Parks with Film Specific, and somebody asked me the exact same question with respect to social networks. I'm going to say, like I said to you, in the sense that it all depends on what kind of film we're dealing with. It all depends on what social platform you've been using all along, how many people are there. It's not strictly metrics, Rebecca. It's also about quality. Again, because I said, you can try to get 20 people to contribute $1, or I can get 10 people to contribute $500 each. See the difference, right? So, I like Twitter and Facebook. They're ubiquitous. Everybody knows them. You don't have to sell it. Like, I have Pinterest. I'm on Pinterest. I like Pinterest. I have, like, different materials. We have photos from events like this, from Raindance events. We put them up on Pinterest on boards, like collages, what have you. But Twitter and Facebook, because it's ubiquitous. Everybody can flick around with Twitter on their phone. They can wait for the subway or the streetcar. They can, wait for somewhere in a bank line or something and just tweet around. It's easy. And Facebook, again, just because of the audience. I mean, it's just you can't compete with that kind of an audience. But did you have other platforms that you were thinking of? Like
no, I was thinking of those,
stuff?
but I guess my question was, should part of your strategy be building a large social network before you even begin something like this?
Yeah, I get this question a lot too. There's no such thing as building a large social network. A large social network is built because you're offering value to that network.
Right.
You're offering value. If you're a filmmaker, let's just talk about filmmakers, because there's other types of audiences for other types of initiatives. But a filmmaker has to offer value to the audience. That means that filmmaker has to have a message. Not like a world-changing message. We'll talk about goals, to self. But they have to be able to offer some sort of a value to their target audience. Target audience. You have to have a target audience for your film. You can't just make a film and say, who's your audience? Everybody! No, wrong answer. That's not the right answer. And it's more than just 18 to 34, based on the West Coast, and they buy underarm deodorant and they shave their or whatever. You have to really be specific. Niche, super niche, tangential communities. Who's the niche audience? For a cause-based documentary like Food Inc., which was a film about the food supply. And I'll show you some stuff that we'll go through after the break. Could be people that have had, for example, traumatic deaths on account of food poisoning. There are communities online for that. And those people will be your best advocates. And those people will click your likes on your Facebook page. And those people will retweet stuff just because you're doing something that helps them and their cause. There are hundreds of thousands of people like this in the United States, in Canada, whatever, in the world, but let's use the United States as an example. Super niche. People, for example, that are interested in eating more sensibly because they might have had some kind of food run-in. I'm just taking a random example. And then tangential communities, people that are looking to live a healthy lifestyle. People that are into fitness, people that are into working out, people that are into cross-training, marathon runners. They're interested in a food-based documentary because it shows them what the food supply is all about. See how it works with this? You have to do the same thing for yourself with all of your films.
So, can you explain, what's the difference between niche and super niche, and where is the border?
Think about it in terms of concentric circles. Circles that share a similar center. And that's the way we, in the business, like to generally render it, so that you can kind of visualize it. So here's this is your niche. This is your niche audience. This is the audience you have to cater to. You have to whet their appetite. If you're crowdfunding to this audience, all the bonus materials that we discussed have to be catered to this audience. Thinking about this audience in mind. Because this audience will be your brand evangelists. This audience will be the audience that will take your film viral. Or not. But this is the audience you have to treat. If this audience at any particular time senses that you're not treating them properly, you will alienate them, and you might also deep six your film. Super niche is this circle here, okay? Super just from the Latin, like above, right? So this is your super niche. These are the people that are not in your niche, but are almost your niche. You like that? And you'll know who these people are because you know who these people are. They're one step removed. Brother from another mother. And this is your, what I call, tangential communities. Tangent, just like abutting. And in our example with Food Inc., I said people that want to live a healthy lifestyle. People into fitness, people into eating well, people into living long, fruitful, healthy lives. Does everybody understand this?
But there are maybe some people who don't like your idea.
But you're not going to market to them. Because marketing costs money, and marketing costs time. And we, as PMDs, or as independent filmmaker business people, we have to think about maximizing our resources. Because resources are not infinite, and we have to know how to leverage our resources effectively, because we don't have them. And that's why we're crowdfunding anyway, right? That's why we're crowdfunding, because we need the money. We need the money for specific purposes, and for those who came in late, for specific purposes we crowdfund. We crowdfund for very specific reasons, not because I want money, and not because the money's there. It's not found money. Crowdfunding is not found money, and I'll repeat the last point. Crowdfunding is not for your entire budget. It's for a portion of your budget, or for a very discrete task that you're trying to raise money for. So you will not appeal to those non-niche, non-interested audiences. Why? Why would you? They can't do anything for me anyway. Having 5,000 people, by the way, on your Facebook page, or your fan page, means, diddly, if they don't do anything for you means, buy your DVD. I don't like DVDs, by the way, I like streaming better. Buy your DVD. Come to a live event. This isn't a PMDing workshop, but if you do attend the future PMDing workshop, we'll talk about the things that you can do. Your DVDs, your live events, they will not evangelize for you. They won't go online and start talking about how great you are. They won't write a guest blog post on their blog and then link back to your stuff. They won't click on your video. They won't buy your swag. They won't buy your merch. And things like that. So the numbers mean nothing unless they actually do something for you.
Does this work better, like for something that's like more, like if it's a show that's more pure entertainment, does crowdsourcing, like does this work better if your film has more of a cause?
Yeah, let's talk about genres because it's a good question and I'll get to it at some stage, but might as well get to it right now.
Sure.
Genres that are really popular in independent film, in historical experience. This is not me pontificating from on high. Horror, slasher horror, Oren Peli, Paranormal Activity, Chernobyl Diaries type horror. Everybody seen Paranormal Activity? Chernobyl Diaries is the new one coming out May 18th, I think it is. You can see the posters if you're walking around downtown. Oren Peli, that's a very popular genre because it already has pre-established communities.
So it's popular to
To their communities. It's all about communities, it's all about audiences, right? So it's to engage a horror audience for a new horror product, if it's a good horror product, like the kind of films, if anybody, based here, because we're in Toronto, so, for example, At Midnight Madness, at TIFF. It's a great section of the festival. They have all of the films over at the Ryerson Theatre, and they always sell out, and they start at midnight. Every screening starts at midnight, and the guy who runs that section is like the most popular programmer at the festival. That's a community you want to, if you're a horror filmmaker, that's a community you want to get involved with. Because for you to tap, if you have a good horror picture, you always have to have a good picture, by the way. We're all presuming that you're crowdfunding a good picture. You cannot polish a turd. I said that in the I figured I'd say it again. But I said that in the meet and greet. You can roll it in glitter, no, but the truth is, if it's a crap film, don't even bother trying to crowdfund a crap film. Don't even bother trying to crowdfund a crap film to an audience you don't care about, who don't have the money to buy your stuff anyway. Like, that's a wasted effort right there. That's money you can send to Haiti, and be put to much better use. Another genre that works very well. Asian martial arts movies, kung fu, kick-ass type action, small budget, Wong Kar-wai type stuff from the 80s, or anything from Dragon Dynasty, the stuff by, I'll think about a title in a moment for you, but that's like a popular genre. And how do you get into that community? Well, presumably if you're trying to shoot an action movie, or you're trying to crowdfund for an action movie, you will have already been lurking at these different communities, and you know who the movers and shakers are, and you're commenting on blog posts and videos that you see, and you're attending conferences and things like Comic-Con. Well, that's not for martial arts, but it has a martial arts thing to it. And you're going to Hong Kong, and you know all of these different things, right? So easy for you to insinuate yourself and your project into those communities. And when you go in and you leave a comment, it doesn't look like you're shilling, and it doesn't look like you're a Johnny-come-lately, and it doesn't look like you're being greedy. It looks like you're an integral part of the community that's just flowing with the flow. Another genre that's very popular, social cause documentary. Change the world type documentaries. Food Inc., Waiting for Superman, Last Call at the Oasis, right? Why We Fight, The Bully Project, Lee Hirsch. Things that like Morgan Spurlock does, Super Size Me, that's the classic, but now we see another one called Manson, it's coming out in May. Social cause documentary, that's another good genre. And then ethnic type stuff. So, Jewish material, Indian material, Bollywood type material, Latin type material. Those have very niche audiences that you can appeal to. And if you're making a film like that, easy for you to get traction is the word. Okay? Everybody clear about genres?
So if you don't fall into any of those, you're kind of screwed.
We have to think like, we're talking about this, we have to think like business people. We don't think like artists all the time. We think like artists when we're in principal photography, when we're in dev, when we're in front of that editing bay, but we do not think like artists when it comes to marketing our picture. See, PMDs are generally business people, marketing people, they're not film people. What I always tell prospects is, you're lucky because I'm also a film guy, so you kind of get the best of both worlds. Because you basically want a wonk, a guy who's really down with the analytics and people who really understand marketing materials and the funnel and how you move people along a path from the point of being aware to being engaged to being, to acting to being committed, all this stuff we talk about in marketing. So you have to think like a business person, and you have to think about genres, and you have to think about how a distributor thinks. How does a distributor think? How can I sell this to my client base? How can I sell this in a market, at Cannes, at Berlin, at the Berlinale, the European film market, here in Toronto, or like in other places, or the AFM? in Santa Monica. How can I sell it? Answer. You have to answer that question to them. When you sit and you bring your deliverables, as they're called, your deliverables, all the different things that you put together in that package. They want to know. You can't just go arty-farty on them. They'll be like, there's dozens, let's just throw a stat at you. There's 45,000, they say, independent films and docs being made every year. Some say 35,000, some say 45,000. 800 of those pictures get into film festivals around the world, the whole circuit. 200 of those 800 go into Sundance, which is the preeminent indie kind of coming out party. 40 of those 200 get some kind of distribution that is worthy of speaking of. In other words, that's some kind of a minimum MG, a minimum guarantee that actually pays some cash somehow, whether it's immediate, whether it's deferred, whether it's 6 months from now, whether it's a combination of other sorts of compensations, or what we call a back-end deal or a service contract. Let's not waste your time with that. And only one of those 40 get a deal that's on the tip of a D-Reese, of a pariah. Everybody see that movie? It's a film called Pariah, D-Reese, R-E-E-S. Only one gets, I think, who bought that? Fox Searchlight, I think, bought that. That's like the lottery, we call it, the lottery method. So you're up against a huge Berlin Wall of rejection if you don't go into it with a business mindset. That's why genres are important. Extra diegetic content. Extra diegetic content. What's extra diegetic content, Sean?
Stuff that's not in the film, per se, behind the scenes interviews.
Stuff that's related to your film, that's not in your film. You gotta have those, number 5. You gotta have those ready to go when you start here at Duration. You have to have those ready to go. And this strategy will employ these during this, for this, with these people. Okay? See how it works? Maslow, like a hierarchy. It's all got to flow together. Raindance uses this example for his film Living with Strangers. Now, right now he has a lot of time because he's in pre-production, should we say?
Going to camera 2.
So, he's in pre-production. So he's got a lot of stuff that he's coming across that he can collect. See this glass? It collects water. So these drops of things that Ellie's getting involved with, he needs to collect all these drops off this table so that they don't fall on the floor and go to waste. That could be anything from, just to give you some examples, the director's diary. Diarize everything. Chronicle everything. Carry around a moleskine. Carry around a notebook like you guys have. Take a small flip camera like the one that's over in the corner next to Jamie. Carry around an audio device, which I do. Your iPad. Grab everything. You never know when you're going to need it. My friend Mitch Joel, he runs a marketing agency here in Montreal called Twist Image. He used to be a music journalist. He was the last guy to interview Kurt Cobain before Kurt Cobain killed himself. He said in a recent talk which I attended last month, if I would have kept the real-life notes from that interview with Kurt Cobain, I'd be able to flog them on eBay and make a nice turn. I don't know where those notes are, so I can't sell them. But if you would have thought, like I'm trying to tell you guys to think now, he'll keep it in a nice place in a box somewhere, in some kind of an archive or receptacle. Literally keep it low-tech, keep it analog. Don't get all... See this? For those of you who missed my little spiel at the beginning, see, it's nice and clean. This desktop is clean. It loads clean. It's got all the files clean. Keep all your materials in easy-to-find places so that when you need to go back to it 60, 90 days, 120 days from today, that you know where to get it. What else could you put together? So diarize everything. Your thoughts, your feelings, your reflections, your sketches. Guillermo del Toro, who's this famous horror director. He's done things like, of course, Blade 2 and stuff like that. You should see the notebook that he had with all the sketches for all the villains and all the creatures and all the color. And it's so lush and rich and great. And it's just like alone as a standalone Moleskine, like as like a slam it on the table. It's got some gravitas, like thump it on the table. That alone could be worth a lot of money, as Guillermo del Toro rises up through the ranks and starts earning the millions and the millions and the billions. So you guys have to start thinking like that too. Those cameras like that, those gonzo cameras like that flip cam there, I suggest not buying a flip cam because it's not actually serviced anymore by Cisco. Buy something that actually has some service and support, but something that's cheap like that, and then just record stuff, you know? Like, better to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission. It sounds like a cliche, but it's true. Just, you're filmmakers, right? So when you're in your artist mode, not your business person mode, just stick the camera and just go, hey, what's up? Hey, you know, like, what do you think about, you know, the sun hitting the wall at 5 o'clock? You think it's good light, Mr. DP? You know, if you're your own DP, go, I think the light's great against that wall at 7:30, you know, Eastern time zone. I mean, I think I'm going to shoot my confrontation scene over there at Central Tech, you know, across the street. I mean, like, people love that stuff. I love that stuff. I'll show you some stuff, you know, after the jump we'll talk about some examples of things that work. I love watching stuff like that. I spend my evenings watching stuff like that. I have a beer watching stuff like that. People go, how do you spend your time? You know, do you sit on Facebook all the time and you sort of like, what do you do? Like you play around on Twitter all the time? I'm researching. ABR. Always be researching. Sounds stupid, but it's true. You're filmmakers. You got to know what's hot, what's cutting edge, what other people on social media are doing. You have to know. If you want to raise your social media numbers, you have to know what they're doing. Yeah.
What's a demographic of, say, a typical person who will contribute money to Kickstarter?
So the question is, what's the demographic of people that are contributing to a typical crowdfunding campaign? It all depends on your niche audience. It all depends on who you're trying to chase. You will get people in this little sort of system that will just like you for you, and will give you money for you. Who are those people? Friends and family. Because you're cool and you know you're good like that. So they'll just give you some money, maybe even a nice amount of cash. But you'll know what these people do. You'll know where these people thrive. You'll know where these people hang out. This niche audience I'm pointing to. You'll know what motivates them because you are one of them. Or you've insinuated yourself so inextricably to them that you think just like them. So that's the typical demographic that contributes. Although if you want to do some research, ABR, go to the Kickstarter.com landing page and just browse around some of the popular campaigns, like I'll show you after the jump, and see what they're doing. And then go, because you can see who's contributing, because they have a tab and it says contributors and comments and stuff like that. Or you can see the numbers, because you can't see the specific metrics, but you can see, for example, pledge rewards, 100, 200, 305. You can see how many people contributed 5, how many people contributed 1,000, how many people contributed 100, and then you can see how that works. So there's no hard and fast rule, because if there was, everybody would be doing it. And moreover, everybody would be succeeding and hitting their targets. So there's no real good answer to that.
Is there an average
Of
that same question?
You'll know relatively quickly whether your campaign, if you're so brave enough to start one, because it takes a lot of courage too. Because on Kickstarter, if you fail, you're out. Not like
You can't get back in, you can't do another one?
well, you can do another one.
But you start from scratch.
Right.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about all that kind of. That's kind of like the touchy-feely stuff. We'll talk about that after. This is more of that kind of the
Inspiration.
brass tacks. Yeah. You'll know right away whether your thing works, and because you're not going into the crowdfunding campaign naked, you're strategizing.
I think what I mean is, does Kickstarter have a average age user base?
And gender.
Yeah, like Facebook
Is it like
this is
20
our
year-old?
average user base.
I'm not
The Wall Street Journal comes on their average age, like that kind of.
Like 65-year-olds probably.
I'm not exactly sure what those measures would be. Although with this recent product, who's heard of the Pebble? Pebble? Yeah, you know what that is?
This is product, it's for like a watch.
Right. The Pebble is what's called an e-paper watch, which is, and I'll show you after the jump because that's one of my examples I'm going to use. Try getting a demographic on that. I mean, who wears a watch? Everybody wears
Not
a watch.
about the event, not about your specific film, about the website.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
But due to the Pebble project, that's what I want to say, the total amount of money crowdfunded on Kickstarter exceeded 100 million total, all projects since it started, with the help, the booster shot from that Pebble product, right? So you try running the metrics on 100 million for a company that just had a massive skew in the graph of an injection, that'll throw the numbers right the whole hell off, right? Because everybody wears a watch. as opposed to a film that's like a kick-ass movie, or it's like a literally kick-ass movie, or like some kind of a horror picture. I mean, yeah, there's some pervs that like watch slasher horror, but there's also young kids that are just sitting around studying piano that like horror pictures too. I don't have a really good answer to that question, to be very frank. Yeah.
There's only one watch in this room.
Yeah. So, how to get this answer? Because, like, if you talk about this watch, double,
Yeah.
this crowdfunding campaign went viral.
Yeah. They're Canadians, by the way. Everybody doesn't know. They're Canadian guys. Vancouver. Yeah.
The Canadian guys in British Columbia.
No, well, of course, the prototype, yeah. I mean, obviously they're in Silicon Valley, but they're from Vancouver. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. But we're talking about crowdfunding, and we're talking about people who use the site. I don't know anybody who does crowdfunding, but when we create campaign, we target some audience, right? The core people on this, let's say, indie world. So, if you don't give this information, how can we target them?
Because, first of all, as I've said, you do not crowdfund from today to tomorrow. Part of this strategy session here is trying to figure out how it's all going to come together. You're not crowdfunding for the entire budget of your film. You know a lot about your film by the time you even dare to go to this stage. In other words, this film of yours has been a going concern for a while. What's a while? 3 months, 6 months, a year? Some filmmakers spend 5 years trying to make their passion projects. So you know a lot about who's going to potentially watch this thing. And based on that information that's in your head and also down in documents, because if you're working with a producer, they'll want to know those things, you'll know what these people like. And it's like baseball. If you don't hit the pitch on the first shot, you might get these people and you might get these people, as well. Meaning, what I mean by that analogy, it means what you do for these people will appeal to these people and these people too. But what you do for these people will not appeal to these people. The direction is from the middle out, not from the outward in. You have to know who these people are, business people. You have to know who these people are. If you don't know who these people are, don't do this. Because you'll fall flat on your face, and Rebecca will answer this question now. When you succeed at one crowdfunding campaign, what do we say here? I remember it was just... why past crowdfunding wins will predict your future successes? Because it demonstrates to people that you know what you're doing. It also demonstrates to people that you have an audience for your project. Because if you succeed in raising 20, 25K, 30K, or wildly successful amounts like 50, 100, that I'll show you after the jump, that shows people, my money is safe. It's not just going to be used by some filmmaker to achieve some passionate dream. Also, it's good for your brand equity. Everybody loves a winner, especially on crowdfunding, because it's a collaborative effort. We're all coming aboard to help you raise the money. This feeling is engendered primarily on Kickstarter, not on Indiegogo, if you don't make your target. For example, Anthony Butts, B-U-T-T-S, did a project called You've Been Trumped. It's a documentary about the building of a golf course in Aberdeen, in Scotland, and destroying primordial sand dunes to level the ground for a golf course. The filmmaker got arrested, he tried to confront Trump in Scotland. It was this whole thing. They used Indiegogo because they couldn't use Kickstarter because it wasn't available to them in the UK. Canadian producer, but the director is based in England. And so he had to use Indiegogo and made the target. But it's not the same. It's not the same because where's most of the great independent film going on? Very frankly stated, it's in the United States. The majority of the great independent films that we all love are being made down south. So you have to think like them. And that means also Kickstarter, and Kickstarter is getting the most press. It's getting the most link through. And also, journalists go to the Kickstarter landing page, kickstarter.com, that's what I mean by that. And they're noticing all the popular projects on the lower band. You want to be there.
So then you don't want to be like promoting Canadian content if you're doing Kickstarter, obviously, right? Like you're not going to make a big emphasis on Canadian version of something, or...
Well, there's this new film that's being done. Again, it's a studio picture, so it's not even relevant. But I'll tell you the content of that film. It's a film by Ben Affleck that he's directing and starring in called Argo. Anybody hear of Argo? Ellie, you hear? Yeah. Anybody? Argo is this film that takes place during the hostage crisis in Iran in the late 70s, in 1979. And it's a true story. And 4 guys tried to get out of Iran through the Canadian embassy. So that's a Canadian content type thing. If you were making a documentary about that, right? Not a feature film with all these actors. You know? But if you were trying to make that kind of documentary, that's something that's Canadian contentable, that's kind of really rah-rah, that's good. You know, like that's the kind of thing that you would try to do. Or I don't know, I'm just trying to think of, I'm coming off the top of my head, documentaries about, you know, there was this film that was funded by Telefilm to the tune of, I think, $5 million called Afghan Luke. Mike Clattenburg is the name of the director. I saw the film at TIFF this year. It's a film about some Canadian grunts in Kandahar. We had troops in Kandahar until last year. So that was a feature film that was funded by the public body, but if you were trying to make a documentary about Canadian stuff like that, it's relevant to Americans, and it's relevant to the world, and it's relevant to Canadians too. You could try to market that as Canadian content. What else?
From your 4 successful campaigns, what percentage would you say of the donors that you know came from the existing Kickstarter network, and how many did you drive to Kickstarter to make their contribution?
That's a good question. There are people that I know. My friend Terry Reed, who's a sound designer in California. Terry Reed at TAOX, T-A-O-X Productions on Twitter. Terry keeps $500 aside every month to donate to a crowdfunding project or projects of his choice on Kickstarter and Indiegogo, I think mostly on Kickstarter, because he believes in the indie film ideal. It means he wants to give money to people that he thinks are worthy candidates for his largesse. So there's people like that. There are wealthy people that came into money, that have money. They are very foundation type, philanthropic type oriented people, and they like to give money away to stuff that's worthy, like great, you know, they believe in stuff that Blair's doing, and they'll give Blair some money because they just believe in good, solid Canadian animation work that's, you know, publicly funded. I have money, let me give you some. Okay, there's that. There's also, if you've crowdfunded in the past, in other words, if you've donated, if you've pledged money to a crowdfunding campaign before, and that project hit target, your propensity to want to contribute to another campaign is much more heightened. What's the metric, Adam? I don't know. Like, what's the percentage? Again, I don't know. But it's just, that's the psychological feeling that's engendered.
But do you have a feel from, because you're communicating like you're doing all your 40 hours of tweeting and posting and that, do you feel that it was successful driving extra traffic? Because you're not tweeting to people that are already seeing your project on Kickstarter, you're tweeting to your niche, super niche, and other communities.
Yeah. But
you'll
you'll
know.
know.
Is it successful that you're driving them to Kickstarter to do that? Or is the bulk of your money appealing to the people that are already overlapping Kickstarter and your niche?
Well, okay. Let's talk about flow-through. Anybody can contribute to a crowdfunding campaign, because on Kickstarter, the money is processed through Amazon payments. So if you're a purchaser of Amazon products, then your credit card details are already registered with Amazon, or you're an Amazon Prime client. You can run it through very easily. You don't have to be anywhere in these 3 circles. You can just throw money in. If you've got an Amazon username and password, click the buttons, register on Kickstarter, it takes 2 seconds and off you go. Ditto with Indiegogo. These people are already online and they're already using social media. I don't meet too many people today that are not online. In fact, I was just listening to a podcast before I arrived here, a Radio Netherlands podcast, and there was some lady some famous American author who had her identity cloned on Facebook. She was like a really straight-laced 60-something-year-old lady, and some kids in Singapore used her identity to superimpose images onto some porn star, and for 8 months they were using her identity to masquerade as some kind of a sex site. She said before she got onto it, she hated Facebook. Now she loves Facebook. Now she set up her own personal profile and using it. So what I'm trying to say by that is everybody's on Facebook and everybody's on Twitter. And even if they don't use Twitter every day, or they only put out 5 tweets a day, like I put out a ton of tweets a day, you guys will see.
Only 5 tweets a day.
Pardon?
That's fine, you said only 5, even if they all put out only 5 tweets a day.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, the reason I use that number, it's a very realistic number because, for example, I said my friend Mitch only puts out 5 tweets a day. And they're always substantive tweets about stuff that are really meaningful to his vertical, to his marketing vertical. So it's usually a pat on the back tweet, I call it, the one that you shouldn't be doing, which is like you're shilling your own stuff, you're drinking your own juice, you're shilling your own sauce, whatever. That's his blog post of the day that he posts out. Then he has something else that he notices online that he thinks that you'd like, so he puts it out. Maybe a response to somebody who gives him a heads up or a high five, and then he responds to that, and 2 other variable ones, I don't know what they are. But he doesn't go, I saw one last night, guy was eating guacamole, he goes, guacamole, like in 3 tweets, so like you could see it on TweetDeck. It was like this, again, it's like a silly way to do it, but everybody has their own approach to it. So basically, everybody's using social media. So for you to like say, would you please are you going to notice? They're going to notice. Like especially if they're following you and they're in your community, they'll know. They'll know. And when you get to crunch time here in duration, you might have it slow for like 15 days, but when you hit day 20, it just takes off. It just takes off. But that's why you've got to be in touch with these people every day. See, as part of the strategy, when we're putting out this extra diegetic content, I like daily. That means you have to have your videos ready sometimes a month, 2 months in advance. Ellie's going to have his videos ready to deploy. If he does some crowdfunding, I think, he's going to have his videos ready to deploy maybe a month and a half in advance. So that when he hits this duration, he's hitting the ground running. Because when you get to day 20 and you're 5,000 away from your target on Kickstarter, you don't want to be looking for stuff to get people engaged. I might be that guy that you're trying to appeal to, and I've been ignoring your emails and your newsletters for like the last 2 weeks because this thing lasts 4 weeks, right? So I'm ignoring you for like the last 2 weeks. But then finally, I'm listening because you're getting more, your messages are getting more overt. So I'm like, okay, let me just chime in here. Oh, maybe I'm the wait and see type. I want to see if you hit 75% achieved. I want to see if you hit 80% complete. And then maybe I'll contribute something. That's when the Twitter thing comes into play. And that's when having some really good extra diegetic content comes into play, so I don't have to think about what I'm going to use. Now people go to me, what kind of extra diegetic content? If you're an independent filmmaker, you got a ton of stuff. I'll show you some examples after the break to whet your appetites and to get your creativity sparked out a little bit. Yeah.
Question. Are there any tax benefits for crowdfunding donations?
They have something called 501(c) in the States, which is a non-profit collaboration. You have to make an appeal to the non-profit, to the NGO in question. And then what you do is you bolt yourself onto them, and through I think it's a waiver of some kind, that the funds can be raised through the 501(c) designation, and the money comes through the NGO and back to you. In other words, you can declare yourself as a non-profit and raise crowdfunding without being incorporated. But in terms of a tax benefit, not to my knowledge, no. Yeah, you could actually, good question, because you could actually secure, this is not relevant to crowdfunding, you could actually secure some tax, we call it soft money, some tax credits from the jurisdiction. They give you tax credits if you shoot in their jurisdiction, or you could get some kind of taxpayer-funded culture regime like Canada, like Australia, like New Zealand, like the UK, like most of the European countries, like Sweden, Germany, France, what have you. That's tax something, but you don't get a tax receipt for shooting a movie. Yeah.
What about, it's exactly extra diegetic, but one of the things we talked about when we were planning our campaign was viral videos. And doing, really short, YouTube-y kind of cookie videos that will drive, that will interest people, and tack on at the end, like now go to, use that to build a kind of audience as a way to build towards that campaign. And whether or not to do that during the campaign or before the campaign to build audience, like how to use that kind of
You're calling them, Sean, viral videos.
Which is,
And the healthy inner skeptic, PMD in me goes, why do you call them viral if they're not viral yet?
yeah.
They have to be viral to be viral, right? You're saying potentially viral videos.
Yes.
Because you've done some analysis of your niche market, considering who these people are and where they lurk and linger and play and twirl, you figure there'll be good candidates for that, and they'll evangelize. It's like a religion, right? They'll evangelize it out there. I like daily contact. On Kickstarter, there is a tab called Updates. It's like a blog. It is a blog. It's a blog roll, actually. First in, last out, right? FIFO. Just goes like that. On top, on top, on top, on top. The most recent post is their number one on the list, and everything gets stacked downward. I like getting in touch with people daily. Even if they're not paying attention every day, people will catch up on the weekend, and they'll spend 3 hours on a Saturday, and they'll watch 5 videos in a row. They might not get it every day. It is not for you to decide how people should consume the content. It is for you to provide the content. This only lasts 30 days, so you're not really going above and beyond the call of duty. This isn't like a year's worth of imprisonment. This is a marathon. This is a 30-day concerted effort of push, especially when you get towards, as I said, if you're not funded yet in the last 48 hours, you're up to 48 hours. We had one team, Nikki in Oklahoma, that's his name, Oklahoma and Nikki. They literally had that camera streaming, or a webcam, on them at the bay, at the editing bay, at the long desk, for 48 hours. You could watch them on Ustream.tv, streaming site for streaming video. You could watch them for 48 hours and see if they were picking their nose, if they were drinking apple cider, or they were drinking, and no alcohol, like no treats, nothing. Like literally they went to austerity method. And then once they cracked, and they cracked it at the 11th hour, it was literally 5 minutes to 12. They just hit it, and then the beer came out, and then everybody was celebrating. That's really viral. If your niche audience cares about what you do, and you will appeal to them because marketing costs money, and you don't have money to spend on people that don't care about you, you'll know what they like. And that's why I would say it's potentially viral, given what you've done, the research you've done. Haven't done any research? Don't crowdfund. Possibly, maybe, don't crowdfund. Don't have 30 days to give? Don't crowdfund. Don't have extra diegetic content? Don't crowdfund. But Adam, it's there, it's available. My answer is no, because you'll look bad. It's very hard to bounce back from a crowdfunding failure, or when you go to your audience, which means putting into play your newsletter, your mailing list, like if you have one. Who has a mailing list here? Anybody? 2 people. 3? Brian? You have a mailing list? No. 2 people have a mailing list. So, if you're going to go to that people and bother them, in inverted commas, you're going to bother them, you better have good stuff to bother them with. You don't bother them for no reason. And given your, Sean, your analysis, you know that they could be potentially interested, and it might go viral. But every day, do not leave them hanging. Whether it's a blog post, a video, preferably both. But how do I get videos for 30 days? You start compiling them now, so that you can deploy. And have a few, and shuffle it up a bit. And leave some buffer room too. You don't want to be like pinned to the wall and say, oh, I've got to put this out every day. You might see the campaign teetering in a certain direction, and then you want to just shift on the fly. The key, again, this is not a PMDing workshop, but the key is to be very nimble, and to be willing to change things up as you go along. Don't be pinned to any one particular strategy, but have a strategy, number 4. Have a strategy. And it's not a cliche, you really got to know what you're doing. What else?
How much marketing prior to your 30 days do you do to build awareness? Because I mean, if you wait till day 1, you've, in theory, like waiting for a viral video, you're 15 days into your month before people know what's going on.
So the question is, how much preparation in advance?
Of social awareness. Because I know like the preparation in advance starts day 1, you start to come up with the idea, making your tapes, making your ideas of that and strategy. But the actual
Let's chant it off like a mantra, because it's kind of like something that you guys should take in almost like as rote. This is not for you do not crowdfund for your whole budget. So this is found money. This is for a very discrete portion of what you're trying to achieve. This is the money, I'm going to give you examples. This is the money we're trying to raise so that we can do a film festival run at these 5 marquee first-tier film festivals, and the money will be used to pay for food, accommodations, and flights for myself, my co-producer, and my massage therapist, whatever, that has to come, otherwise I have like major stress, pains, and we can't deal. So these people are coming, and this is what we're running the campaign for. This is not for the full budget. It means you're already in the marketing mode from the minute you put pen to paper on the script. As PMDs, we say, when's the best time to bring in a PMD? From inception. From the minute that the idea enters your head that you want to do this, start thinking like a PMD or hire a PMD if you're so well endowed, resource-wise. But start thinking about all these things. And this will come up much later on down the line. This is not the first thing that we do as independent filmmakers. We don't go script to crowdfunding.